Welcome to the Feasibilian Project. We exist to help you learn critical thinking skills and recognize logical fallacies, myths, superstitions, cognitive dissonance, biases, and distortions. A Feasibilian is one who is capable of making critical decisions without relying on unfounded belief or blind faith. We encourage you to follow evidence that is logical, reasonable, and likely to have a feasible explanation. We are all connected to the natural world in one way or another. Think for yourself. Embrace reality. Be a Feasibilian. We are the Feasibilian Project. What is the greatest problem of today's world? Is it climate change, growth of global population, fake news, or risk of terrorism? These may all be true, but there is one pattern beneath the surface of all these great global threats, which makes everything even worse. It's the uncertainty of one's own opinion. This certainty often leads to the inability to use critical thinking, reasonable judgment, and rational argumentation. In some cases, this can lead to negligence, manipulation, and psychological harm in certain religious or political arenas. In extreme cases, this is downright dangerous, as it opens up a can of worms for a whole host of cognitive biases, distortions, fallacies, myths, and superstitions. The core of this bias is what's known as the Dunning-Kruger effect. In simplicity, this effect can be expressed in a graph. If you begin with a horizontal axis, there is knowledge, and on a vertical axis you have the degree of self-certainty. According to how this effect works, the less knowledge you have, the higher confidence is. At the peak, it is quite a significant problem. For some people, they think it's enough to read a few articles about vaccinations, and then suddenly become the greatest vaccination expert on the subject. During the Olympic Games, everyone suddenly becomes the best coach, and during the election, everyone suddenly becomes the best professional political scientist. After the first peak, however, with increasing knowledge, the level of certainty decreases. You begin to see that things are not just all black and white. There are far more complicated issues than there seemed to be at first. It's extremely important to understand that education leads to humility. After reaching a certain amount of knowledge and becoming an expert, confidence starts to increase again, but it will never reach a level at which it was at the beginning. Charles Darwin said it very simply: ignorance more frequently begets confidence rather than knowledge. Bertrand Russell, the Nobel Prize winner, went on even further. He said the whole problem in the world is that fools and fanatics are always so certain of themselves, and wiser people are so full of doubt. This phenomenon attracted researchers David Dunning and Dunning-Kruger. They took a group of students and tested them in several independent domains of grammar, sense of humor, and logical reasoning. They had the students evaluate how they saw themselves perform. Almost all students rated above average on a scale from 1 to 10, somewhere around 6 to 7. It uncovered two important trends. Those that were incompetent overestimated themselves. On the other hand, those who were competent tended to underestimate themselves. One explanation for this is that if someone is competent, they expect the same level of skills from the others, and therefore they evaluate themselves worse. But another part of the experiment was even more interesting. Participants were confronted with their results and asked again to conduct a self-assessment. For those who were competent, it led them to evaluate themselves correctly and objectively. With the incompetent ones, there was no change. The conclusion of this study is that incompetent people tend to overestimate themselves very highly and continue to stay stuck with rigid thinking. The second problem is that it's impossible to explain to them that they are incompetent. If someone is unable to use logic, you can't use logical argumentation to explain to them that they can't think logically. If you have ever tried to explain to a stupid person in an online discussion that he is being stupid, you already know it's impossible. It's important to note here that using the term incompetent is not a bad word. It just means that a person is not yet competent or knowledgeable in a certain subject. It all depends on how willing a person is to change the way they think and humble themselves to admit that they need to learn more in order to be competent. It's definitely curious why some people are so offended at the notion of being wrong about something. Do we need to be so insecure about how much we know or don't know? Do we really need to protect our fragile egos so much? There is great value and maturity in removing yourself from the emotion of being wrong about something and using the scientific method to rule out what doesn't work and keep what does work. The last important conclusion is that the only way to fight the Dunning-Kruger effect is increasing your knowledge. By increasing your knowledge, you can increase competence and admit that you didn't understand something in the beginning, but after enough study, you can eventually come to understand just about anything. At the same time, it's essential to practice humility while also teaching others to do the same. Have you noticed this effect with others in social media discussions? It's always important to admit that all of us are subject to this effect and that we need to ask ourselves how we can avoid it. Here are 5 tips you can use. Number 1, wisdom means to say I don't know, I'm not sure, or I was wrong. Humility is a virtue, while certainty is often a symbol of arrogance and ignorance. 2, develop your knowledge. Educate yourself. Be curious. The more you understand the subject, the less you will succumb to non-objectivity. 3, watch out for confirmation bias. People tend to look for information that confirms their values. For greater objectivity, the opposite procedure is better. First, examine arguments on both sides, and only after that, form your opinion. Number 4, don't fight while arguing. Don't make it a competition. Don't use argumentation fallacies, and definitely don't insult others who don't agree with you. Approach the other side with respect, and slowly try to help them understand the complexity of things. Search for the truth together. Number 5, always admit that you can be wrong, and acknowledge that you might be subject to the Dunning-Kruger effect yourself. As Václav Havel said, follow those who seek the truth, but run away from those who have found it. How many times in several thousand years since religion started have we seen self-righteous apologists and zealots claim absolute certainty in their beliefs, with little or no convincing evidence in the real world? Well, there you have it, folks. Tread carefully as you seek the truth about any subject, and be kind to yourself and others. We can't afford to continue going off the rails on the crazy train. The Dunning-Kruger effect is just one way we can identify and then ultimately overcome cognitive bias, distortions, superstitions, myths, and logical fallacies. We're all guilty of it to some degree or another. There is much more work to be done, and it never seems to get any easier, but we still need to hang in there and keep trying. Take care of yourself and take care of each other. Thank you for watching. If you found value in this video, please give it a thumbs up by clicking on the like button. Share your thoughts in the comments below and subscribe to our channel. Also, be sure to click the notification bell when you subscribe so that you don't miss any future videos. Take care of yourself and take care of each other.